Hey everyone, thanks for watching A&Q. In this series, we're answering frequently asked questions that people have about Christianity and faith, and I am really excited about today's question. Why do we celebrate Easter? Now, one of the reasons I love this question is because there are so many reasons why we might even be asking it. So no matter where you're coming from, I want to try now for just a couple of minutes to give you a sense of the hope that surrounds this day. But first off, let me just tell you, because this comes up from time to time with people, the origin of the word Easter doesn't trace back to paganism. We can talk about other resurrection stories which are not at all like the historical account of Jesus. But even as the scholars at Britannica will admit, there's now widespread consensus that this word Easter, it doesn't reach back to some Anglo-Saxon goddess. It probably traces back to an old Germanic word that meant dawn. And you're going, well, why are we even talking about this? Because we who are Christians, we who follow Jesus, we who proclaim him as the world's one true Lord, we see the events surrounding Easter as the dawning of hope. Let me try to explain it. There is a God who wants a relationship with his people, with you. But due to humanity's rebellion, sin now separates us from a perfect God. So Jesus, the Son of God, came into the world to offer us a way out by taking on our sin debt, dying on a cross, and then 3 days later being raised to life again, ultimately defeating death once and for all. Now, that is an awful lot packed into 2 sentences, and we've actually addressed some of those ideas I just mentioned in other videos. But that is really the foundation on which we build the Christian faith. See, our whole faith really rests on this fact that Jesus is alive today. In fact, one New Testament scholar, his name was Paul, wrote that if the resurrection didn't happen, if Jesus really isn't alive, then Christian faith is useless, and we who are Christians should be most pitied. See, the thing that most of us struggle with is the outlandishness of this miracle. I mean, did this really happen? And I understand why we would ask those questions. I mean, right now, you're saying Jesus is alive, the same Jesus who was killed on a Roman cross. You're telling me that he rose from the dead 3 days later and is still alive? And my answer is yes. Now, there are some who try to get around this by saying, well, Jesus never really died on the cross. And, they go into how he was revived in the coolness of a tomb and then, he leaves. But I'm telling you that Roman soldiers that were tasked with killing Jesus wouldn't have let that happen. They knew how to execute people. There are others who argue that the ones who were closest to Jesus stole his body from the tomb and then made up this resurrection story to keep the Christian faith alive. But the question there is, how are they going to get past those Roman guards who are guarding Jesus' tomb? It just doesn't make sense. And then history tells us that many of those same disciples eventually died horrible deaths at the hands of the Romans because they continued to preach insistently that Jesus was in fact alive. I mean, if they stole his body or made the whole thing up, I have a hard time believing that eventually they're going to give their lives for a lie. There's so much more that could be said for this, and we haven't even considered the hundreds of eyewitnesses who saw Jesus alive after his resurrection. But this is all to say that there is evidence supporting Jesus' literal, bodily, historical resurrection. And I would even go so far as to say that there's a logical way to think about all of this that leads to the conclusion that Jesus really is alive. That's part of why we celebrate Easter the way we do. I mean, this is rock solid for us. But I imagine that some of you, maybe even those of you who sort of go through the motions, every Easter, you're having a hard time feeling the weight of what this actually means. Maybe the next best question to ask is, so what? I think the resurrection is the pivot point of all eternity. I want you to think of it this way. We live in a world with outrageous heartache, with undeniable ugliness. We live in a world in desperate need of help and healing and rescue. And deep down, some of us are getting the sense that this gap between us and a completely perfect God is too much for us to deal with on our own. But because of what Jesus did on the cross, and because he is alive today, I trust what he says about all of that. Now I listen to his words differently. Now I pay attention when he talks about this life and what comes after this life. He has so much credibility with me if this story is indeed true. One of the ways we say it is that Jesus will have the last word about everything, if the resurrection really happened. But it also means, like, right now, I will trust him in this moment, in the middle of my life, in really practical ways, in profoundly spiritual ways, and in undeniably personal ways. I believe Jesus. And that gives me hope. And that's why so many Christians celebrate Easter the way we do. Now, I realize that you're going to have more questions that you want to talk about, and I would love it if you would include those in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join us next time for another A&Q video.